Welcome to Minding My Business, the CEO Story, Season 3, powered by Nucleus Office Parks. Now, this season, we've got 6 of the biggest IPCs, not only in this country, but across the continent. Shishir Baijal is Chairman and Managing Director at Knight Frank India, and it's always wonderful to see this dapper man. How are you doing? I hope all is well.
All well, Hrishi, and always a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Wonderful. The entire focus, obviously, is real estate with a slight bend towards commercial real estate and the outlook. Now, let's start with your research. I really look forward to your research findings, and Knight Frank's research threw up some very interesting numbers on what we call mall culture, quote unquote mall culture. The gross leasable area and grade-wise details of malls across the top 8 cities in India. I'd like you to give me the numbers of that and talk us through that research.
Thanks, Hrishi, and thank you. We are really proud of our research, and is one of those things that we really look up to. Talking about the retail report that we recently launched. In fact, this was one of the first times that we actually undertook an exercise where we not only just gave gross leasable numbers, as you just mentioned, but actually made an attempt to grade the malls into ABC. So we do like-minded comparisons. And we came out with some great, interesting findings. We covered pretty much all of the 271 malls, or 92.9 million square feet of space, gross leasable space, as you mentioned, across the 8 major cities. One of the key findings that we found, Hrishi, was that mall development, as we all knew, is an expert's domain. Whilst many of the developers and many people had entered into shopping centers, the number of active developers or active mall developers has actually shrunk from 123 in 2010 to just 33 post 2018. We also took an exercise, as I just mentioned, in trying to grade the malls and try to get an understanding of how the malls are doing. And we realized, but before I come to the numbers, just to explain what we feel, a grade A mall in our view is one with a leasable area of approximately greater than 500,000, with a vacancy less than 10%, and having an anchor as a department store or a hypermarket with great mall management, frontage, adequate car parking, etc. Whilst a grade C mall is one which has a gross leasable area of lesser than 100,000, vacancy exceeding 40%, no anchor tenants, poor mall management, and whatever. The findings really were that since 2010 to now, the number of grade A malls have increased to 45. Whilst that having said so, the grade C malls have also close to 26%. So therefore, what we are saying is that close to 57 malls across the 8 cities are in grade C, or technically what many people say have become ghost malls, or malls with less than 40% tenancy. Therefore, also providing an opportunity for alternate usage.
Really remarkable, those findings. Gives us a lot to mull over. Shishir, office space is showing a lot of resilience. Again, I'm going to quote from a Knight Frank report. It says that commercial office sector, that grew by 29% year on year, and transaction volumes have surpassed the pre-pandemic quarterly average by 6%. I think it's only fair that you talk us through that.
Commercial office has been a spectacular, and it's since a long time. In fact, before I come on to commercial, I would also like to say that this is perhaps for the first time in close to 7-8 years that both commercial and residential have simultaneously started doing well. Otherwise, it was either one of them. So having said that, 2019 was our record year in commercial leasing, and Knight Frank analyzes the numbers in terms of gross leasing. And we had approximately done 60 million square feet of space in 2019. And then, of course, as all of us are aware, that the pandemic came in 2020, and the numbers came down to close to 39 million square feet in 2020 and 38 million square feet in 2021. But the pent-up demand, as during this time, the hiring kept continuing unabatedly by all the sectors, especially the IT, ITS sectors. There was increased hiring with not much additional space being taken during these 2 years. Also, since 2021, there has been a substantial amount of return to office from the earlier return to home concept. So you had return to office, you had pent-up demand in terms of increased hiring. All of this led to a huge amount of pent-up demand, which took on as increased leasing during 2022. We've had a spectacular last few quarters, and if it continues in the same way, I'd be very confident in terms of gross leasing that you will surpass the pre-pandemic number of 60 million square feet that we had done in 2019 by the end of December 2022.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, Shishir. Shishir, I'm going to now just zone in on the IT industry and its effects on real estate. Now, there are two aspects of it. One is IT spending and IT outsourcing, and the other is IT jobs. We'll come to IT jobs a little later. But right now, do you think the recession in the US will impact US-based corporations' IT spending and IT outsourcing, that industry?
Great question, Hrishi. I think there are two parts of it. One, of course, the fact that there is a slowdown in the US as well as in the Western countries, that will bring a slowdown in terms of the IT spends. So there's no question of that, and we've seen that by many of the larger corporates in their last quarter earnings when they had given their estimates, as well as large Indian corporates saying that there could be a slowdown in the long-term demand for IT services. So there's no question that with the slowdown, there will be a reduction in IT spends as we move ahead. On the other side, generally, there's also a view that if there is reduction in costs overseas, there could be a higher level of outsourcing to India. Having said that, the reason outsourcing to India is not a market for cheap labor, it's actually a market for quality talent. Those days are gone that you had cheap labor. But we have abundant amount of quality talent available in this country. So there could be an arbitrage in terms of the increase in outsourcing to India. How that balances off, one will have to see in the next few quarters.
At the other end of the spectrum, there are inflation-led wage hike pressures in the US and Europe. I mean, even after Hrishi Sunak came in, there's been so much of talk saying, my God, what's going to happen right now? People are waiting, watching. Is that leading to more IT jobs in India? I mean, it's what you said, Shishir. I mean, we're not, you're not looked at as only cheap labor anymore. We are bright minds. So is that leading to more IT jobs?
It could lead to, as I said, could lead to, most definitely. And that will be the balance that one will very, very carefully watch as we move ahead. The rupee has depreciated 11%. I think it's done extremely well in compared to the rest of the emerging markets, or rest of the currencies at large, actually. So that makes it really more attractive too. Having said that, I think Indian real estate, quality Indian real estate is affordable. In fact, it gets more affordable with the currency, the Indian quality labor and market engineers, etc., abundantly available. And that would increase. I think it would increase into, it would perhaps negate some of the impacts that a slowdown in the Western economies and their reduction in IT spends will cause.
Shishir, in July, I remember there was a lot of buzz, a lot of movement, a lot of conversations about unicorns demanding more office space. Are unicorns demanding more office space today, or was that something that just happened in July and then just died down? And if so, which city leads the market?
The unicorn market peaked in 2020, 2021. I think in those times with high monetary liquidity or fundraising in the market, there was a huge amount of funds for the startup space, and they really flourished during that time. And I think, and we've seen that all over India, and the amount of startups that came in and I mean, as you rightly said earlier, extremely bright minds and everybody getting together and trying to provide a solution to many of the things of the future. And it really, really flourished. However, come 2022, there was a fund crunch, and that was a game changer. And this led to a fair amount of budget cuts everywhere, really more focus on P&Ls. And now you've seen a substantial amount of layoffs happening in many of the startups. So I think it'll balance itself. I think the industry is no more what it was in 2020 and 2021. Perhaps a little different now, but more mature now. And in terms of the second part of the question, I think cities like Bangalore, Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Pune, and NCR were the key markets for startups.
Great. Now, let's come to office leasing, Shishir. Lots of commercial watchers are saying office leasing is up 97% in January to September in 6 cities. Now, there are two parts to this question again. What are the chances of it hitting record numbers in 2022? And most importantly, is this spurt in leasing also because of a spillover in demand from the last 2 years, is what we want to know.
I think it's been spectacular. The commercial markets, the demand has just been staggering. And yes, I think if this demand continues and what we see, there is no doubt that we would hit pre-pandemic numbers. Of course, the greatest factor in this, Hrishi, is to see how this current quarter or quarter 4 pans out. This is an extremely important quarter, as you rightly said yourself. US is, just come off another 75 basis point increase. Bank of England, another 75 basis point increase. The European Commercial Bank, yesterday, another 75 basis point increase. How all of this is going to play out, how all of this will in terms of the slowdown in these economies will play out, and what their effect will be on office space in India over the next few quarters is to be seen. If the demand that was there in quarter 2, quarter 3 of 2022 continues in this quarter, we will end 2022 at a record year. Even if not, I think we would still, in gross leasing, would be on or about, our estimate is 55 million square feet of space at the worst, compared to 60 million that we had done in 2019. Having said that, the look for the future, I think it's bright. Even if there would be perhaps a slowdown, I hope the slowdown is for a short period, but the recovery will be could be quite remarkable in its comeback in terms of quality office space, etc. The other trend that's changing and it's moving is something perhaps we would like to have a look at is the trend towards quality of space, Hrishi. I think as people are moving back to offices, another trend that we are seeing and noticing today is most corporates and occupiers are also looking at what we call a little bit of flight to quality in terms of office spaces, in terms of focus towards wellness of their employees, in terms of compliance to ESG, etc. So there's a whole different construct that's taking place in office leasing today.
Okay, what about vacancy levels in office? Have they also considerably reduced? If so, what could be the reason for that, Shishir?
Vacancy levels having reduced. As I said, the demand's picked up, and because of the pandemic-led issues, the supplies were slightly slower. But construction was slower during the pandemic time. So as supply is slightly slower than demand, the vacancies have, of course, reduced. So I think across the markets, you'll see a close to 100 to 200 basis point decrease in the vacancy levels.
Can you just enlighten us about new supply of office in the first 9 to 10 months, if you look at 2022?
Thanks, Hrishi. The number of office spaces that came in terms of launches were 37.1 million square feet of space in January to September 2022. This fell way short of the number of transactions at 41.4 million square feet of space, and therefore the incremental supply fell short of the incremental demand. And that's one of the reasons, as I just mentioned earlier, was the reason why vacancy rates have come down across all the markets.
Okay, let's go into the next phase of this chat. REITs. What about REITs? Now, despite the uncertainties, how have they done? Going forward, do you think, Shishir, office REITs will grow? Also, your thoughts on industrial and retail REITs?
Thanks, Hrishi. That's a wonderful question. REITs has, of course, been long looked for, I can remember from 2005 onwards, and they really just came on board a few years ago. And now there are 3 REITs in India, and they've all performed satisfactorily, considering that they've given close to a 12% plus per annum return amongst the 3 REITs that have been listed. That's close to 6% rental yield and a 6% capital appreciation. All the 3 REITs are office REITs. And this performance has come on the backdrop, and you must remember that, of the global pandemic, which at one point of time had led to physical occupancy in many of the campuses to be lower than 10%. During this time, The performance has been great, as very few or none of the occupiers left their office space and continued to pay their rents on time. And this is what's reflecting in the performance numbers. And I think so. Fundamentally, I think they've done extremely well, and are a great hedge for many people, for a safe place to put their money. And I'm very, very confident that soon more REITs will come out, perhaps in the warehousing space as well as the retail space.
Now, the e-commerce and third-party logistics market has gone nuts in this country, and in a good way. India today is one of the fastest growing e-commerce and third-party logistics market. Now, given this fact, how has the industrial and warehousing property market fared? And do you think demand will continue to rise, Shishir?
So I had mentioned earlier that this was one of the first times in many years that both residential and commercial market were growing simultaneously upwards. How could I forget warehousing? So this is actually the time when all three, in fact, by the way, all four, including retail, are moving up all at the same time. If you just look at the warehousing demand, it's just staggering. At 13.9 million square feet of space in 2017 to 51.3 million square feet of space in 22. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And this is just in the 8 major cities. And this is one of the sectors that have actually started growing throughout as the level of connectivity is improving everywhere between highways and the new airports and ports and everything else. The warehouse demand across the country is growing. You saw a great amount of demand, a close to 62% growth in FY 2022 itself. We feel that this growth, and we're seeing this drivers in infrastructure, this growth is going to continue in the near future.
Awesome. Now, what are the office locations to watch out for moving into the city where you and me live, Mumbai? How is Parel in central Mumbai, for example, Bandra complex, BKC, how are they faring?
I think in our city, before I get down to that question, Hrishi, I want to just say something. I think the amount of infrastructure being developed in our city has, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like that being developed. The metro connectivity, the coastal road, the work that's going on in perhaps an absolutely staggering pace, the Trans Harbour Bridge that's coming, the new airport, and all the other road works that are happening for east-west connectivity towards Pune, etc., are mind-boggling. And they will open up a huge amount of space for redevelopment or for development in the future, thereby reducing the pressure on the earlier pressure points that we have. I'm very confident that by 2025 or so, Bombay or Mumbai will be a very, very different city to live in than what we are living in today, in terms of our standards of living, in ease of commute and everything else, which is perhaps the major issue for any office goer.
Which actually, I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
Logically, I should have asked you that before going into office locations, but really, is working from office back as opposed to working from home? I mean, for the longest time, it was always WFH. I'm sure enough of your colleagues came to you and said, to you and the HR department, WFH, work from home. Would you say working from office is back?
I would say so. I mean, I'm a bit of an old timer myself, and I'd love to operate from the office spaces. And I think an office space is far more than just a table and a desk and a computer. It gives you space for collaboration, it gets you to get together, etc. But having said that, I understand where people are, and there's a need and requirement to understand where the new age employees would like to work. And so I think the whether it's work from home or work from office is too black and white. I think there's a fair amount of gray in the middle with hybrid structures, and I think they are here to stay. And we've seen that worldwide in many organizations, are back to office completely, and some offices are fairly hybrid, or they have the hub and spoke principle, where you have one office as well as many smaller satellite offices closer to where the employees are staying. So you have offices close to people's houses. And I think that those are the HR would have to be adaptable to what the needs of the employees are, because people are the main line of business. So I think if you need to understand what their requirements are and to work towards it. But to answer your question again, whether in Mumbai, I feel that it is substantially, I would say, it's back to work from office. You see that traffic on the road, you see the density, and you see that hub, you see in BKC and in Lower Parel, as you mentioned, the whole excitement is back again. And I would say substantially, most people are back work from office. And to answer the second part, the first question that you asked for, I think there are a number of business districts that are doing well. Suburban business districts like Andheri, Goregaon, LBS Road, Kurla, Chembur are very active. But fundamentally, the premium markets of Lower Parel and BKC will continue as perhaps the most sought after locations there. And in those locations, grade A vacancies are all close to, I would say in BKC, close sub 10%, which is virtually nothing. And perhaps in central Mumbai, it would be close to 13-14%, which is a very, very low vacancy rate.
Sure. Consider this almost as though, we're saying one of India's leading IPCs should give advice to landlords. What do landlords need to consider if they need to capture the real estate demand from startups?
See, startups need, at this stage, especially today, you're looking at a very different world, Hrishi. You're looking at perhaps, slowing and shrinking economies throughout the world. India is perhaps one of those few examples that, we are showing a growth of perhaps a GDP growth of 7% this year. The rest of the countries are, in all probability, will be having shrinking demand, within this context, if one would look at how do we attract these startups to come and how would they be able to make those commitments? So fundamentally, the occupier today needs the flexibility. And the more the developers can give the startup the flexibility and the scalability in terms of increased space, the better it is. And I think we'll have to understand that this sector of startups is extremely dynamic and the change radically and drastically. So the developers would have to plan and provide accordingly. If the developers find it difficult to provide this flexibility on their own, my advice to them would be to perhaps tie up with operators who are specialists in in co-working spaces or flex operating spaces, and then provide that service to startups.
Now, you briefly mentioned hybrid working, so I'm going to deep dive into that now. Yeah. What about co-working and flex players? How much are they occupying in India? What are your feeling towards the co-working space sector and flex players?
I think, what I mentioned to you in the previous question regarding startups is actually for everyone today, Hrishi. Today, all of us, none of us really know what the next few quarters are going to be. Here today, with all the global headwinds that are coming in, with all, we've got a war on one side, we got high levels of inflation on one side, we got perhaps UK and US, the two largest markets, one largest market, including China, on a slowdown spree. So you don't know how it's going to really pan out. So today, all of us all occupiers are looking for flexibility in their office demand. And that's where the demand for co-working and flex spaces come in. If we just look at in the pre-pandemic time in 2019 or so, they had an 8% share in the market. Today, that's come up to more than 24 to 25% share in the entire office take-up. They're one of the largest takers of space today if you look at all sectors. Within this, you've got everyone, whether it's startups or it's institutions, it's IT, anyone, all of us are also part of this, part of taking space from co-working or flex operators.
As a workspace strategy, do you have some research numbers? If you don't have it, who would? Hybrid working as a workspace strategy, how's that looking according to your research?
Fundamentally, the fundamental point, Hrishi, is that as per our latest survey that we had done, which is called the Global CRE Survey, 90% of the occupiers have highlighted real estate as extremely strategic to their business. And that's to get employees, to recruit, to retain, and motivate the employees. The right levels of real estate is important. And that's why I had mentioned in one of your previous questions that flight to quality, the flight to office space that meets these needs of employees regardless whether it is in terms of wellness, or it is in terms of ESG, or it is in terms of meeting all the other social needs of employees, is extremely strategic to the occupier or to the employees as such. Hybrid is one of those things. Now, to give them a space and give them a choice of between home and office, or as I said earlier, office close to home, are all ways and means to ensure that the employees is retained, motivated, and extremely productive.
Excellent. What are the sectors that are at the forefront of the hybrid working model? And how many of them, according to you, are planning a portfolio expansion, Shishir?
I think most of the ITS organizations are today in some sort of a hybrid mode. But I would say they're more, in my view at least, in more work from office than work from home as perhaps earlier this year. But a substantial part of it still remains as hybrid. Many of those that I've seen with the hybrid and office working model have continued at least till Q3 this year to expand their office footprint. And as I said, and I'm making this point until this quarter because the last 2 months has been, substantially damning in terms of the rate increases and perhaps some of the changes that are taking place in the rest of the world. I mean, we ourselves have had a 190 basis point rate increase. So things could change quite dramatically over the next few quarters.
I believe telecom and consulting, those sectors are seeing the highest rate of return to office. You just talked about being old school and working out of office spaces, likewise me. So 75 to 100%, your comments on that, please.
I agree with you. I think telecom, consulting, education, healthcare, e-commerce have all increased their space take-up, implying that the return to office in those sectors are strong. So, if I look at it in many cases, in many cities, most places, the return to office is substantially higher. I mean, those days seem to be long gone where occupancies were less than 10-15% in offices. Today, I think most of the offices are substantially full, barring in certain places, in some sectors where, people still continue to do work from home.
Will another interest rate hike impact home sales demand? The Knight Frank Affordability Index had deteriorated by another 2%. At the other end of the spectrum, we're hearing stories about best performing September month in the last 10 years, despite rising interest rates, increase in stamp duty, and Shrad falling in this period. Important things in India. What's the reality, Shishir?
Well, I think we've come to the right part of the interview now, the residential sector. I think we need to put up a little bit of a background to this, Hrishi. You'll remember when I met you last, and the housing sector was having a slowdown since, perhaps 2014, 2015. And for the last 7 odd years, they had a continued amount of slowdown. Prices got corrected. Huge amount of supply side reforms took place in terms of, whether there were changes took place in demonetization, RERA, and number of supply side reforms took place. And as I said, prices came down tremendously. Affordability, well, Knight Frank comes out with an affordability index, which is fundamentally the EMIs, household EMIs that are paid over annual household income, was 93% in Mumbai in 2010, came down to 53% last year. And that made it actually, can you imagine that Mumbai became substantially affordable as our household incomes came up and our prices got corrected, etc. Over the last, but some 2-3 things that changed, that happened. So while the prices were getting affordable, the GDP was growing, but for some reason, people were still not buying houses, and that's why the residential sales were going down, as I mentioned, from 2014-15. But something changed, and something changed during the pandemic time. And we came out with a buyer's perception survey that said that during the pandemic time, one of the greatest changes that took place was people's perception towards owning property. People wanted the safety of their home on their head, a safety of a home, as well as perhaps a better or a larger home to accommodate school from home or work from home. All these things put up a huge buyer's momentum towards buying a home, coinciding with perhaps being at its most affordable level in terms of pricing, etc., as well as the interest rate being at its lowest, as well as the stop that many state governments gave, including Maharashtra, on stamp duty cuts. All of this propelled the market to increase substantially. And over the last 6-7 quarters or last 2 years, we've seen the market gain in momentum. This gain in momentum has continued regardless of the interest rate hikes that have happened. And that's the reason why you mentioned that perhaps we've had a better month regardless of Shraddh or not, albeit that the growth rate, at least in October, had slightly started slowing down. So all I can say is that if the interest rates don't go up disproportionately and the prices of apartments don't disproportionately bring the affordability index down, we are in a good shape at this point of time.
Are builders willing to pass on the benefits post the centre's anti-inflationary measures?
As a response to the policy rate hikes, we've seen that some developers have responded to mitigating measures to boost the sales in terms of limited period fixed home loan interest rate offers, payment flexibility, etc. So there have been, but at the same time, there have also been now a renewed request from developers to the state government again to perhaps bring in another stamp duty reduction or something that would help the segment to continue to do well and to mitigate the interest rate hikes that are causing the prices and everything else to go up and causing a wee bit of hardship to the home buyers.
Well, Shishir, you know that before I wind down, I always like to take a step away from our business conversation and just end with a bit of lifestyle. I don't know if you, post the pandemic, you've been able to take a wee bit of a vacation with your wonderful family or solo, travel or holiday destination that you really enjoyed. And what did you enjoy most about being there? What were your activities there?
Thanks. I love travel, and I've always always took time out to go out to the family for a longer period of time, especially during summers. And during that time, Europe and most definitely, Italy and Spain were our favorite destinations. I'm a foodie and I'm a self-drive person. So I generally just like to take the car and go out, enjoy the cuisine, enjoy the food, enjoy the wine, and just relax and enjoy what those countries have to offer. I enjoyed New Zealand. I am, a resident of New Zealand, and we spent substantial time during the pandemic there. And I think it was just fabulous, and I just had an absolutely great time. Having said that, I think there are great destinations within India too, and I love, especially what's happening post-pandemic in India when we've started really rediscovering some of our places. Whether it be even some spots in Goa, or look at what's happening to Alibag post the Roro, or happening to places like Pauna and Mulshi and everything else. And I just love and enjoy spending my long weekends or wherever, just drive to those locations and just chill.
Wonderful. Speaking of Italy, I remember we hired a car once and drove down the Amalfi coast. How beautiful
isn't it?
Lovely.
I've done that, and yeah.
So your fashion sense, what do you like to wear in the wardroom when you're working, and outside it when you're relaxing or on holiday, for example?
I'm a pretty relaxed sort of a guy, Hrishi. I'm fairly easygoing in my dress senses, etc. I'm, in the office, business casuals or suits, depending on what the occasion says. Tie in the odd occasion if it requires that. And post office hours, I'm fairly jeans, casual shirt, shorts. As I said, my dress sense is fairly relaxed. I like to be just easy and more comfortable, and that's for me my fashion sense.
Lovely. I've always seen you dapper and dressed for the occasion. It's wonderful to meet you. All of you, knightfrank.co.in, knightfrank.co.in. Should go and check out the website and find out all the latest that Knight Frank is up to in India. And with Shishir's leadership, they've gone on from strength to strength. Got to wind down this particular episode of Minding My Business, the CEO Story, Season 3. This is powered by Nucleus Office Parks. And just like Shishir Baijal, Chairman and Managing Director at Knight Frank India, there will be another leader from an IPC next week. Till then, stay with us and, happy listening. Shishir, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Hrishi. Thank you for having us here. Thank you so much.
94.3 Radio 1.